Michael. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Oh, it's so fun. I always say this. I feel like I say it every single time on this show, but I love having my friends, former, Auburn students and classmates, and then also former student athletes and coaches and everybody I work on. And that is just like so cool that I have this chance to do that. And so, I mean, because we go way back to undergrad at Auburn, and your wife was one of my roommates. And so that's how we connected.
Yep, that's exactly right. Unfortunately, I'm not exactly an athlete. You've got an engineering professor on here, so
well, you know what? Different. But what's so cool about that is how intertwined you are with athletics and what you do now, even though you're an engineering professor. And so tell everybody a little bit about like why you're at Auburn, what brought you back to Auburn, and what you're doing now.
Well, like you said, I was at Auburn for undergrad, and I was here from 2003 to 2007. And like most Auburn folks, when I left, all I wanted to do was to come back. So when I left Auburn, I went to Stanford and I studied a field of engineering called biomechanics or human movement. And I made it my goal to come back here and join faculty. And sure enough, I was able to accomplish that in 2016. So I've been here now coming up on 6 years and work in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, doing biomechanics research, teaching biomechanics. And that's really in large part why we're here today is because of that.
Yeah. And so tell everybody a little bit, because you have something super unique that you do on the research side of things, which has led to this thing called Exo Armor. So I want you to tell everybody how that came to existence.
Well, it began when I started building my lab really back in 2016. And at that time, I was allocated a certain amount of funds to buy equipment and acquire equipment that I thought was necessary to do biomechanics research. And so that's really where it began, because that's when I first purchased a handheld 3D scanner. And this handheld 3D scanner cost $25,000. So this is an extremely expensive piece of equipment. I bought the scanner, and then I bought a couple of 3D printers because I foresee the potential of combining 3D scanning with 3D printing to do things like custom prosthetics. And I couldn't envision exactly what it'd be like, but I saw the benefit of combining those two technologies. And then fast forward about 3 years after I've really had the lab up and going, I've graduated some students and I've had some research projects come and go. I received a phone call from my neighbor, who's Robbie Stewart. And Robbie Stewart is the head athletic trainer for Auburn football. And he knows me, and he knew the research I was doing and the equipment I had. And he called me and he said he had a wide receiver with an injured hand, and he wanted to know if we could make him something that could allow him to still play, allow him to still wear his wide receiver glove. And I told him absolutely we could, even though the reality is I didn't know how we do it. But I told him sure enough. So he brought Anthony into the lab, and we used the $25,000 handheld scanner. We scanned Anthony's hand. We got what's called a point cloud, and so you can imagine 100,000 dots in 3D space. That's essentially what we get from the scanner, and that represents Anthony's hand, the surface of his hand. So we used that. We created a brace model from it, and we 3D printed it, and we bolted it to his wrist guard, and he went out and he played with it. And that's how we really got going.
Wow. And if I remember correctly, like if I'm remembering some of the stories you've told about that first game when he was back, like he had a pretty good play, right?
Yeah, he scored a touchdown the first time he was ever on the field with our equipment on. So absolutely, that was extremely exciting. That was an away game against Texas A&M. Some Auburn fans may remember he took it for a reverse for 57 yards for a touchdown. It was extremely exciting. Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell everybody a little bit. So you have the scanner, they come in, you do the whole scan, the body part, like whatever, full body scan if you need to. And so how long does it take to get something like this printed?
It's a great question. And when it first started, we made a shoulder guard for Seth Williams, who's now at the Denver Broncos. And it took 28 hours to print.
Oh my gosh.
Very clearly coming in on a Saturday morning, taking it off the printer and handing it to Kirk Nielsen, one of our athletic trainers here for Auburn football, so that Seth could use it that day during the game. But since then, really, we've had two major developments or milestones in the technology that's allowed this to turn into a company. One is that we've sped up the print time tremendously. And so our standard shoulder guard, the thing we made for Seth, used to take 28 hours. Now it takes about 3 hours. And one of the most common devices we make are custom fit shin guards for soccer players. And that takes about, well, probably around an hour per shin guard to make. And so it's extremely fast. The other big development is moving away from this $25,000 3D scanner, because essentially we figured out how to do this on a smartphone. And so that's
wow.
what now is we have our very own app. So you can actually go download our app, you can scan your shins, and we'll make you a pair of custom shin guards.
Like I am thinking as like the high school soccer player, college soccer player, if I had a pair of shin guards that were molded to my legs, oh my gosh, how much more comfortable would that have been?
Well, that's been one of our more popular products. And the reason is because since it is made specifically based on the contours of your shins, what happens is that the shin guards don't move when you play. So you're not having to reach down and adjust them.
Or like the soccer players in the audience know this, using electrical tape to keep them in place so they don't.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing. I never
That's
heard
what we used to do. We used to electrical tape the bottom.
Did you wrap your leg?
Just around like an outside of the sock.
Yeah. Wow.
Like top and bottom of the shin guard so it wouldn't move.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, that's our biggest benefit, I think, because we're putting these on kids as young as 6.
Oh, wow.
And we've got, right now, we've just outfitted a 7 or 8 Auburn University women's soccer players with them. So we're getting some really good feedback on that for that very reason.
That's incredible. Okay, so that's going to lead me to a question, because you just said kids at age of 6, and then we also know this started at the collegiate level. So is this available for like the everyday consumer, or are you moving in that direction?
Well, what we've established pretty well is our presence in multiple programs all the way up to the NFL. So we've installed 3D printers at the Falcons. We're about to install them, one at the Ravens, the Seahawks, the Indianapolis Colts, and then we've done multiple college programs in, I think, all 5 major divisions of college sports, college athletics. But in terms of our offering to the individual consumer, right now, what we have available are custom fit shin guards. So if you go to our website, exoarmortech.com, you can see them, and you can see how to scan your shins, and you can order them.
And we'll link that down in the show notes too. So if anybody wants to check that out.
Great. Yeah. And then eventually we're going to be offering shoulder guards, rib protectors, and thigh pads along with our shin guards to the general public. So that's coming. But as of right now, what we have available to the individual are our custom fit shin guards.
Okay, so my brain like goes like 90 to nothing thinking about all of this, because being in this world of athletics for so many years, I've seen students come through like injured athletes, we're having to rehab them. But then I'm also thinking of like shin guards are obviously used for protection. And then also thinking of our like offensive linemen wearing knee braces, because we know like that's for protection. We're not saying they were previously injured. So how can this benefit like athletes moving forward from a preventive standpoint versus just a recovery standpoint?
Well, we started as preventive, but the reality is we see a huge future here in terms, we started as responsive to injury, but we see a huge future in terms of the preventive, because we're currently making shoulder guards, rib protectors, and thigh pads custom fit for football players around the country. And that is preventive gear. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, we can make a custom fit shoulder guard. Imagine a shin guard, but made to the contour of your shoulder. It's about the same thickness, same padding. And essentially we place it inside a compression garment with a pocket.
Wow.
Is essentially how it operates. So similar to Evo Shield, you might have heard of that technology.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is you wear this under your standard shoulder pads. And so you've got your standard shoulder pads, for example, for football, that provides you that protection. But this custom fit shoulder guard, not only does it add some padding to your shoulder to protect it, but it has a semi-rigid outer shell that actually constrains that joint. So the AC joint is commonly injured in sports. This is something that helps hold the AC joint together to keep you from spraining your shoulder when you fall on it.
Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to like totally geek out a little bit, because, you know, you are biomechanical, like engineer. We're talking biology here. And when I'm thinking of prevented injuries, I'm thinking of so many sports where we see top injuries depending on the sport. For instance, women's soccer, ACL tears, you know, we're seeing quads, all this other kind of stuff for runners, all these things. Like how vast could this go of preventative measures to really keeping our athletes safe when we know when that young age start, their bodies aren't fully developed?
Yep. Well, what's great about what we can do with this technology is that as a child grows, imagine a 6, 7, 8, 10-year-old, right? Their growth rate is extremely fast. And so what we can do is we can essentially grow with them, right? So you can have a custom fit shoulder guard, a custom fit shin guard when you're 6. Maybe in 6 months, that kid's grown an inch, right? So they need something else, so you can rescan them. So we can do that. And that's, I think, critical for these kids because they are changing and they're growing so fast. If you just Google youth soccer, you can see how poor fit these shin guards are. Some of them are huge. When you get into the pro level, they're actually using youth kids shin guards. That's kind of the opposite problem. So they're not even getting maximal protection. They're doing it because they're sick of these things moving around. But there's a lot of potential to add some protection here for these kids, especially football. You know, we're here in Auburn. Football is always kind of front and center on our minds. But we've made gear for lacrosse, which is a growing sport in the U.S. I know a lot of women, they get struck in the upper arm with the lacrosse stick, and so they get the bruise. And so we make a pad for that. Hockey is another big one. We don't think about it a lot here in the South, but hockey is a big sport that could benefit from it. We've made gear, believe it or not, for a diver on a swimming and diving team.
Okay, that was actually in my thought of thinking, like, we see a lot of shoulder injuries, we see a lot of wrist injuries for those students who are divers and swimmers. And like, so are these waterproof? Is that kind of where we're also leading to?
Yes, the short answer is yes. And the great thing about it is that we use the surface of your body to make it, which means depending on how thick we print this and how thick the padding is based upon what you want, it's extremely low profile. So, to use the metric system here, 3 millimeters is about as thick as we make this thing. So in total, you're talking maybe 1/8 of an inch in thickness. But again, it follows the contour of your body.
Yeah, and so you mentioned something a little bit earlier about like the everyday consumer, that there's an app. So if I'm understanding this correctly, say I wanted to purchase a pair of these shin guards. Also, let's also put this out there. I'm not coming out from retirement. So I don't actually need these, but I think it would be a pretty cool process.
Yep.
Then I would take my phone, just my everyday like iPhone or Android, and use the camera with this app to scan the contours of my leg.
Yes, that's exactly right. So right now, if you have an iPhone 10 or a later model, basically anything with the Face ID technology, then you can do this.
Oh, wow.
And so essentially the process, if you go to our website, it's a 3-step process. Says download our app, watch the how to scan video, then submit your scans. We send you an invoice and then you receive your custom fit shin guards. We even laser etch your name on the inside of it. And so we can tailor it to whatever you want. It's pretty fun.
I mean, this is just, it's so cool to think about the technology and what you guys have come up with and how it has benefited, current athletes, but also thinking of our future athletes and protection. And because we know nowadays they play all year round. Back when we were young, like we would skip from sport to sport, but we'd always kind of have a break. But now we see kids either specializing or they are playing different sport every single time, and how beneficial this would be for them just to help continue to prevent injuries.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And like I said, the great thing is we've made gear for 8 sports now and counting. And so there always seems to be a new application that we find. We've made gear for basketball. We made a thumb guard for one of our Auburn basketball players, a shooting guard, and he was hitting 3-pointers while wearing it. So pretty amazing stuff that we've been able to do with this.
Yeah, this is so cool. And like I said, we'll be able to link everything in the show notes of how people can get in touch with you guys. And if they want to order a pair of these shin guards or just have a conversation with you, I think it's amazing. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is because I'm like, whoa, you guys are doing incredible stuff. Let's tell the world about it.
Yep.
Yeah. So Michael, the podcast is called Confessions from the Sidelines.
Yep.
So I would love to know, what is your favorite memory from standing on the sidelines?
Well, okay. So I mentioned this early in the show. I played football until about 8th grade. And by played football, I mean, I stood on the sidelines. So I'll be honest with you. I don't have many good memories of the sidelines in that context, but I do have a sideline related memory that I would like to share.
Yeah, let's go.
So we talked about this earlier, but the very first guard we ever made was for Anthony Schwartz. I don't think I mentioned his name, but he played at Auburn. Now he's at the Cleveland Browns. We made him this hand guard, and he went out and he wore it in a couple practices, but it was a big deal when he returned to play because he was one of our best wide receivers. And he came out in the field, and again, it was against Texas A&M. at College Station. And I was in my living room watching this game during that time. And he came on the field. I knew he was wearing the guard. Nobody else did. He was able to fit his glove over top of it. And he took the ball reverse 57-yard for touchdown. And from the sidelines, I received a text from Dr. Michael Goodlett, who basically said Auburn Engineering !
Yes.
And it was I about fell out of my chair when I received it, because I'm watching this on TV. I'm receiving a text from the sideline. We're scoring a touchdown. My family's going crazy. I had friends over there going crazy, and it was just a wonderful experience. So I wasn't actually on the sideline during this time, but the text came from the sideline. So I don't know if it counts and that meets your criteria.
Oh, it totally meets the criteria, because like in your brain, I'm going, oh yeah, like Michael just scored 7 or 6 points for a touchdown at a football game, right?
That's what it felt like. That's exactly what it felt like.
That's amazing. Well, Michael, I'm so thankful for you being on the show. Thanks for sharing all this information. And again, I'll be sure to link everything in the show notes if anybody wants to reach out to you guys.
Great. Thank you for having me again.